is for everybody is different, and it's different based on situations as well, right? And when you go online and you look up definitions for motivation, you get a variety of definitions, all kind of going towards the same thing. Of course, my favorite is the act or process of motivating. Didn't we learn you're not supposed to use the word in the definition, but whatever, right? So really what motivation is why we do what we do, or why we behave the way that we behave, right? And like I said, for everybody that is different. So why I may choose to exercise might be different than someone else's why, right? My purpose for it. Maybe I'm going to run a marathon, which I'm not, but maybe someone else is going to run a 5K, and so even your purpose or your drive is different, right? Even in little aspects. So I'm going to turn it over to Elise now to talk a little bit more.
We're kind of like the tag teaming duo. So you have to bear with us. We may kind of flop at this a few times. Like, I don't even know where I am, so Sandy will probably interrupt me at some point. So take a minute to just look at this quote, think about it, and then get ready to kind of share if this resonates with you. So what are some of the barriers to getting people to do some of the things that when we want people in our school buildings to change, to do something different, to adopt something new? What are some of the barriers with that?
Fear.
What?
Fear.
Fear. Interesting. Yeah, that's good. Fear of what? Exactly.
Unknown.
Fear of the unknown. Yep.
Judgment.
Judgment. That's a biggie, especially in coaching.
Stuck. Just stuck.
Yeah, being really stuck. In motivational interviewing, we talk about that as ambivalence. That's one of, we'll get to that, but that's like one of the core components of motivational interviewing, that people are inherently, we're stuck. We always want to change, but we don't really want to do the work to change. So it's a great one. Anyone else?
Time.
Time. That's a biggie. That helps us.
And we have my comfort zone.
Yep. It's hard to do new things. And what is the role of the coach in all of this? What is your role as a coach, or maybe more broadly when you think about coaching? It's just an entire field. So anything from your reading coach to the coach of the sports team to life coaches, any sort of coaches. What's the role of a coach?
Support.
Support. Encouragement.
Give them the tools that they need to help to succeed.
Help to give you tools. Yep. Anything else?
Think of different ideas, because what works for one is not going to work for the other, so you kind of have to balance out a little bit.
Exactly. So tailoring it to what specific people need.
Reflection and dialogue.
Reflection and dialogue, yeah, that's great. That's kind of the tools that we use to get people to change. Feedback. Yeah, I love it. You guys are getting super specific about the types of things that we do as coaches to help facilitate change. So that's great. I mean, I just wanted to kind of start there because, as I kind of mentioned already, motivational interviewing is really built on this idea that nobody really likes to change. Ambivalence is completely normal. And the idea of motivational interviewing is to help people kind of come to terms with that ambivalence and find a way forward. So what it is, not. We'll start with not. It is not a way of tricking or persuading people. So that last quote is really, I think, summarizes the sentiment we all feel, right? Sandy has felt that way. I felt that way as her kind of mentor and coach. And so we want people to just do what we want them to do, but that's not what my MI is. It's not like going in there and I want you to do this, so I'm going to get you to do this. It is a purposeful tool focused on behavior change. So we'll talk more about that. It is not therapy. Some of the skills we'll talk about today, for those of you with the counseling background in particular, will feel like some of your therapeutic background. That's great. It's a great foundation to build on, but it isn't therapy. It's a non-directive and supportive conversation is how you should think of it. When I'm working with somebody and I'm using MI, that's what I'm doing. It is not easy to learn. Sandy already talked about this. It is a simple action that takes practice, a lot of practice, to engage in it well. It is not practice as usual. It's helping others find their own capacity for change. Somebody said that actually, I think, up here. It is not something we do to people. So we don't MI someone. It's something that we do with. Does anybody have any questions about that or any kind of additional thoughts about what they think it might be and what it might not be? Okay, we'll move on. So qualities of an effective coach. What are they? What makes a coach effective?
Do business.
What?
Good listener.
Good listener, yeah.
Non-judgmental.
Non-judgmental. Mm-hmm.
Patience.
Patience. Mm-hmm.
Knowledgeable.
Knowledgeable. Mm-hmm. Knowledgeable what?
Whatever you're coaching about.
Mm-hmm. So, and that's an interesting thing too. So, and I think that's actually true, you know, in the terms of the content piece, right? Like you're a PBIS coach, you should be knowledgeable about PBIS. But there is something to just be said for the process of coaching. If you're knowledgeable at that, even if you're not the content expert in the skill you're trying to help somebody move with, that might be okay. But yes, certainly having some knowledge about the content helps. Anything else?
Welcome.
Welcoming. Mm-hmm. That relates probably to those other things like good listener and non-judgmental. Anything else? Effective coach. I've got a whole lot of bullets up here that are going to pop up. So feel free to keep sharing because I've got lots of ideas. I know you do too. What?
Constructive feedback, like being good at giving
Yeah, being good at giving constructive feedback.
feedback.
Yeah, that's, yes. Others? I'll show you what I've got. What are some of your reactions to these? Do they make you think of other qualities of coaches? Are there ones you're like, I don't agree with that, or that doesn't resonate with me, I don't understand what that is? Do you see these in your role as a coach, as a PBS coach?
Okay, so we're going to do a first little activity around this. And what I need you guys to partner up. Pretty much you're partnered up. Can you two work together back there? And you two work together, and then I think everybody's got a partner. Is that right?
Yeah, look at that.
All right, it's perfect. Okay, so go ahead. You guys can move, and I want you guys to decide. One person is going to be the speaker, and one is going to be the listener. And once your partners, you guys have decided that, raise your hand so I know that you're ready to go. All right, it looks like most people probably have it figured out. All right, so we've got a speaker and we've got a listener, and this is what you're going to be doing. Okay, speaker. What I want you to do is I want you to think about a change that you are considering. Now, this has to be a behavior change. I don't want to know that you want to, whether or not to shave your beard or cut your hair. It's not about that. It is about a behavior that you're thinking about changing. A lot of times, and here we are, January, right? New Year's resolutions. A lot of people often go to some kind of health component, right? So maybe exercise is one that some people go to. It doesn't have to be a health-related behavior, but something that you want to change and that you're comfortable sharing with your partner that you may or may not know. Okay, this isn't therapy, remember? So identify that change and think about that. You're going to talk to your partner about it. And partner, you're the listener. You're going to engage with the speaker. You're going to listen to them as they discuss the change that they're considering. That doesn't mean that you're going to sit there still like this. I've had some people take it a little too literally. You're not going to just sit there. Okay? You listen to them. You're going to engage with them. Okay? Around this topic. And you're going to have a couple of minutes. All you're going to do is just dialogue about this. Questions? All right. Go ahead.
I need some space here.
So I missed this one already, right? This is right now. We're going to this at this time slide. Okay. Thank you.
You decide it.
You can sit here and just express myself.
Well, I just feel like
I'm having too much trouble.
Where you're firing up. So, do you want to be
I'll do
I'm going to talk about something more last year, I got a thing I stayed with her for another month. This is where I've been and find okay, how to go learn not necessarily like Richard Young kind of like a fake guy that like major but I think that's what I'm
All right, I'm going to have you guys wrap up your conversations however far you are in 5, 4, 3, 2. You always have to go after like the presenters, right? Or the worst. All right. So during that activity, what I want you to think about, I'm gonna put some things up here, and as we go through that, whether you were the speaker or the listener, I want you to kind of tally mark how many of these things the listener did during the process. Okay. So here's the first one: agreed, approved, or praised. Tally on your paper. You're tallying the listener.
So do we tally ourselves? No.
You tally yourself or your partner.
Okay.
Whoever the listener was, you tally them. So you're all tallying, okay? Reassuring, sympathizing, or consoling. You did those things? Your listener did those things? Tally that. Giving advice, suggestions, solutions. How many of you solved something? Huh? I know, I'm just asking. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, I'm just asking. You'll see. All right, questioning or probing. At this point, how many of you have 3 or 4 tally marks? How many of you have 0? 0? Okay. Yeah. All right. Interpreting or analyzing. Persuading with logic, arguing, or lecturing. Moralizing, preaching, or telling them what they should do. Withdrawing, distracting, humoring, or changing the subject. By the laughter, some of you did that one. Ordering, directing, or commanding. Disagreeing, judging, criticizing, or blaming. Shaming, ridiculing, or labeling. There are counselors in the room that we could refer you to later, if that's okay. Warning or threatening. You can go to Jerry about that one later. Okay. How many tallies? How many of you have 0 tallies still? How many of you have 1 to 4? How many of you have 5 or more? Okay. What do all of these things have in common? Any idea? What's that?
The listener is talking.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, you're right.
It's probably all not motivational interviewing.
Yes.
the listeners, well, maybe except for what judgment is involved.
There's some judgment, certainly. Okay. All of these, even those at the top, are roadblocks to true listening. And so, yes, they aren't really, there isn't a place for all of these in MI, or there's certain times when a different way of doing this plays a part in motivational interviewing technique. So while in the beginning, we always see this, more people are like, yeah, we consult them, we sympathize, and it's a natural thing that we do, right? But with motivational interviewing, doing these things, especially getting down here, warning and threatening, hopefully nobody does that when you're actually listening to someone, right? So all of that comes into play when we talk about the how that affects when we truly listen to what someone is saying. Because what someone is saying is more than the words that they're actually coming out of their mouth, right? So we're going to go through some of the techniques and some of the theories and ideas behind MI, and we're going to do this activity again a little bit later when you have some more resources behind you and you have some more skills behind you, and we'll kind of guide you through that.
Can I just pause you for a second? So it's abundantly clear to me that there's a little bit of like a reaction to this, that these are all roadblocks. Does anybody want to share like what they're feeling about that? Because it seems like it's, for some it looks like it's a really, some it looks like a no, and some it looks like a oh. But there does seems to be some different like moments that are happening in the room. So anyone want to share their moment?
Well, I was listening, and she was talking about giving her kids chores and stuff like that. So I just asked the question: are you giving them allowance for that, the chores? Is that really blocking it? Because I'm just asking, are you giving, because most people give allowance for chores.
And we're going to talk about questioning and the right
Because
way
it's
to
not
question.
that I was, saying, you shouldn't. I'm just asking just to see, what other people do, what people do.
So one of the things it seems like, and I feel like you're not alone here, is can we never really do any of these things in MI? And that's not the case. But like Sandy said, there's a time and a place and a way to use different things, and your questioning question is going to get totally visited in upcoming slides.
Can I ask you, Sandy, you were back here when we were talking.
Right.
You tapped me on the shoulder and thanked me a second, based on, I guess, what I was saying and doing. So can you elaborate more on that, what you saw?
Right, because I went back and I was like, you're a counselor, right? I think part of that, I think I have some prior knowledge of that. I'm pretty sure I've seen you before and remember that. So there's a little bit of cheating there. But it's also in the way that you were engaging with her and some of the way that you questioned was a little bit different. And so counselors, while maybe, I don't know if you've ever been trained in MI specifically. Have you?
No.
No. It's for counselors, it tends to be a little easier to do some of these MI things because some of them are inherent in some counseling techniques. I'm not a counselor. I'm not a certified counselor.
So people with client-centered, like Rogerian training tend to have some prior knowledge of a lot of the skills we'll talk about.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, she was able to pick that out. Anybody else? I know that there was a couple hands over here.
Mine was just, I feel like sometimes when I question, it gives me more information for listening. So my question was along the lines of this,
Yeah, and we do have to question because as a classroom coach, I can't help a teacher if I don't question them. But there's ways to question and how to question that changes the whole dynamic.
I think too, it made me wonder, what is the purpose for the listening?
Yeah.
Is, especially, again, I thought of it when Carlton was talking about the role as a school counselor.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm working with a student, my listening is going to be a different way of listening than if I'm speaking with a colleague. And
Oh, absolutely.
I
It's
think
situational.
The purpose behind that might then fall into different ways that I might respond or might do or not do some of these things that are listed.
Right, and if you're talking to a student, you may not be using MI because you may be not focusing on their behavior change at that moment.
Right.
You may be focusing on some other type of thing, and MI isn't the end-all be-all. It's not going to, just engaging in one MI conversation isn't going to change someone's behavier either.
That was one that didn't make the list, but it is not a panacea.
Yeah, it definitely is not. It'd be nice if it was, because then, right, we just magic wand, we're done. But that's not really how it works. It does take some time. As the speaker, how did you guys feel during this? Anybody want to share how they felt talking to the other person? None of you said you came to solutions, right? Did you come close to a solution? No? As the listener, you're like, you didn't tell us to come up with a solution.
Did you feel listened to?
Yes. As the listener, did you feel listened to?
Yeah. I mean, as a speaker.
I mean, I don't think there wasn't enough time, I guess.
Right. Right. Yeah, I did certainly only give you a couple of minutes. Yeah. So you would definitely maybe engage in longer conversations, but you'll see that when we do this again, we're going to do it in a short amount of time again, and we're going to have you pay attention to the differences and how it feels. And so when we were talking about that with the spirit of MI, well, it says client-centered. It's whoever you're talking to. Okay, so if I'm talking to a teacher, that is my quote-unquote client. You're talking to a PBIS member or whatever, that's your client. So you're focused on that person, and it's really about them. And it is respectful in the sense that you're honoring them and their autonomy. So when I go in and I work with a teacher and I'm using motivational interviewing with a teacher, I don't go in knowing it all or having all the answers. I'm pulling the answers out because oftentimes the answers are already there. We just have to dig them out. There's under some layers. And it is more listening than it is telling. So if you're doing true MI, you should be doing less talking. But you're helping the other person almost talk to themselves in a way. And it's collaborative. So it's not me telling someone what to do, or it's not you telling someone how to behave, or telling them how they should believe, or how they should think. But it's working with them, meeting them where they are. Because if, we have those people who are right here and we need them, we want them to be here. But if we're at two different places, if we don't take ourselves down to here, they're never going to move, right? So we have to meet them wherever they are and help guide them. And for some people, it's going to be pretty quick because they might have their own internal motivation, their own drive, and might have come to some kind of purpose that they really want to work for. And others, it's going to take a little bit longer because maybe they're trying to process everything in their own head, right? So at least we're going to talk a little bit more about change talk.
Okay, so like I said earlier today, the motivational interviewing is really built on this assumption that ambivalence to change is a completely normal occurrence. So we all go through this. Even when we really, really want something, we're still ambivalent toward the action to get us there. And I think really understanding that helps to bring out this ability to kind of get over these roadblocks to listening. Related to that is that there's also this inherent, despite the fact that people have ambivalence, people desire change and they communicate it if we hear it, if we're listening for it. And so that's what we talk about as change talk. So there are different things that people might say that show that they are wanting change and ready for change. And so a main component of motivational interviewing is being able to listen for this change and to reflect it back. And so some of these are kind of easy. What do you think desire sounds like when somebody says it? I want. What else? I wish. Mm-hmm. Right. So those are like the obvious ones, right? Like somebody says to you, I really want to do blank. You're not like, well, this person's very ambivalent towards change. They obviously really are expressing very outwardly that they want that. That's an easy change talk to listen to. And then the question in MI is, how do you seize on that moment? Ability. What do you think it might sound like when somebody is talking about change in relation to ability? I can. Mm-hmm. And how is that relevant? How is that relevant to change? Does it facilitate it? Is it a barrier to it? What do we think about ability? It's a facilitator, right? So I can do this. See? Reasons and benefits of change. What might that sound like?
Well, because.
Yeah, like giving you the because. Like I need to do this because. What in your world? I'm a PBIS coach. You're working with teachers. You're trying to get classroom systems put into place. it's not going as well as you'd like. What might a teacher say to you? They're the teacher that's not implementing PBIS, but what might they say to you about reasons?
If only.
If only. I really need this to change. I can't deal with these kids anymore. If I could just get this under control, then this will happen. So they kind of can recognize what those different reasons would be. I see some of you writing. I'm a note taker, so don't feel like you need to stop, but also know that the slides will be available online. So no pressure to write everything on the slide. Need or problems with the status quo. What do you think that might sound like? I'll give you a hint. My example was kind of like that. What?
This isn't working.
This isn't working. That's a great one. Oh? Ooh, I was not supposed to get both of them. All right, and then commitment. That one I think is like amazing, right? Like we hear that, we're just like skipping down the hallway as a coach, right? Like I'm gonna try your suggestions tomorrow, you know. And I think the whole point of all this is you can kind of see some of these are more obvious than others. So sometimes I call them like the diamonds in the rough. You know, I think the hardest one for people to identify is this need for problems with status quo. That often sounds like venting. That often sounds like complaining or blaming somebody else, like I can't deal with these kids anymore or whatever it might be. But when you really are listening, you could hear what that really is a desire for something to happen that's different. And once that desire is there, you are going to have more success at moving somebody if you're skilled at hearing that and working with them on that. Does that make sense to people? All right, so as I kind of already mentioned, there's this idea that there's strength, right, in commitment that people have to their change. And so kind of what Sandy's talking about like if you're here and somebody's here, like it's going to be really hard to move them, a lot of that has to do with like the degree of ambivalence. And that relates to a lot of different factors. Time was one of them. We talked about that already. Ability is one of them. If people feel like they don't have the skills to make a change or it's going to be a really wild, out of my comfort zone kind of experience or I absolutely have no time to do something different, it's going to be harder to hear that like loud, strong, I guarantee this is going to happen this semester. I'm going to get this done. You know, that's not going to be our everyday. You might hear things like, this is my like joke with my husband is like, I'll try. I'm like, can you just not try? Can you just do it? You know, so like that's kind of that, like that change shot, right? But it's kind of on the weaker end of it. And this is being live streamed. Luckily, he doesn't go on Facebook. And so, you know, there's levels of that. And that's another thing to listen to. Because when you can determine, I heard some change talk, and it's either really strong or it's less strong, as we'd like to say, to keep it positive, then we know where our work is, right? We know where somebody really is. This is still me, right? So, okay, so there are 4 stages of MI. This is kind of like if you think about any kind of engaging with people and building relationships, this should sound familiar, but it's important to think about it because it helps to map on where you are in the specifics of the change process with coaching. So the first process is engaging, and the whole big question for engaging is like, should we work together? And that's like your rapport building. It's your getting to know each other. It's your building trust. It should take about 20% of the time of the entire process. And I think it's important to say that, to know you can't just jump right in, and you can't be respecting somebody's autonomy if you expect them to work with you this minute, right? Like you've got to kind of do some of that work. I have a coach that used to say, put some money in the emotional bank. I think that that's a kind of really good thing to think about. The next part is focusing. It's really it's like your problem identification phase, right? So in coaching with an individual person, that might be your interviewing, it might be your data collection, but you're really trying to focus on what is it that we even want to change. And that's going to mostly be your kind of MI conversation. It's that dialogue we talked about, what it is and is not. And this is so that we can think about collaboratively, like where is a useful direction for us to head. The next is the evoking. So we'll talk more about this, about evoking questions. So it's really why. Because you want to evoke that true desire out. So the change talk is somewhere in there, but what you're trying to do is, like what Sandy said, is you're trying to pull out both the motivation and the how. Because most people who are in the building, even though it might not feel like that all the time, they probably have the skills in there somewhere and the motivation, and it's just a matter of how we tap it. I truly believe this. I truly believe, you know, and Sandy will tell you this, like people will call me the boss sometimes, and I'm like, that's not my job. My job is not to be the boss. My job is to help pull the best skills out of my people and optimize their skill sets. And so that is really what the evoking is about. And then the planning is really like what we often talk about in schools is like goal setting, action planning, other words that make teachers kind of skin crawl. But that's what that is. It's really the how. It's what are we going to do about this? How are we going to achieve this, this change that we want to occur?
So one thing I do want to say too is when you talk about planning and the last part of this where the coach supports their effort, you're not doing it for someone. You ever seen the social discipline window? I know we talked about that a lot in restorative practices, but it's either doing to or with, kind of like what we talked about. MI is we're not doing to someone. MI is done with someone. It's a guiding type of process is the way I always think about it. So you're not doing for them because that doesn't support self-efficacy, right?
And on the flip side, you're not there to kind of do it to them where you're kind of scolding them or trying to hold them accountable. That's that non-judgmental piece. If the coaching using MI is really going to work, it's not an accountability process. It's a negative thing. It's more about, I really want to do this, but I need additional support to do that, and that's what the coach is there to really do. Am I still on? So, as I've mentioned, you've maybe thought of this word already. I talked about ambivalence. So a lot of this is really about discrepancy, right? We all in this room have the version of ourselves we want to be, and we have the version of the self that we really are. I make the joke of my version of myself that I really want to be is my PBIS researcher self with my children. And the version of myself that I really am is sometimes deteriorating and doing all the things I know I'm not supposed to do as a parent. Like, why are you doing that? Put that down, stop touching your brother. You know, and so we all have this discrepancy in our life, right? Like where we want to be and where we really are. And a skilled person using MI is really listening for that. They're listening for what's this person's values of the person they want to be. I'm working with a classroom teacher. What's the kind of teacher this teacher wants to be? And where are they right now? And helping them to see those discrepancies. Again, not in a judgmental way, but in a way that just says, I've heard you on the one hand say that you really want to be the type of teacher who's really calm and collected, and on the other hand, you're really struggling because you're falling apart in the classroom at times because the kids are really just getting on your nerves, and that is so challenging. That must be really hard to want to be one way and feel like you're not able to achieve that in your classroom. You know, that's a way you can kind of say that, not in a way like, you said you want to be a really nice teacher, but you just keep yelling at these kids. You know, like there's a difference, right? Both are a discrepancy, but there's a way in which we communicate that. Expressing empathy, which I just tried to model there, and showing that we can realize that the work of whatever person that's trying to move is really genuinely hard, and that they're working hard, and that must feel challenging or frustrating or whatever the word is, but that's true empathy and genuine. This idea that with ambivalence will come resistance to change potentially, right? So, and not taking that personally, not feeling that that person's hopeless, not feeling like there's no reason to continue to even try with this person, but kind of what we talk about in MI is like the rolling with resistance.
Yeah, but.
And then, like Sandy was talking about, like really supporting self-efficacy. Because as we talked about, ability has a lot to do with change, right? If you don't perceive that you have it within your ability to make a change, you're not going to make that change. So it's really about helping bolster somebody up and find the skill sets, find the strengths that they have to build on, and help them realize that they can do this. Sometimes that means starting really small. Sometimes it means finding those gems and examples that they've already done it. Because a lot of the times people have done the things that they want to do. They just haven't been able to sustain it. That was my thing I was sharing with my partner, is trying to get back on the bandwagon of my health. So we're going to switch again, and Sandy's going to talk about some of the specifics of how you use this in language.
So, of course, we have to have at least some acronym, right? Sometime it gets into this. So, ORs. We always talk about using your ORs when we talk about motivational interviewing. Open-ended questions. You had some suggestions, some questions before about questioning. Can you question? Absolutely. But when you provide a yes/no question, you get a yes/no answer, right? And the conversation stops. So when you provide an open-ended question, people are going to talk more about it. So and we purposely have done these things. So we have an interview, a teacher interview that we created, that we developed off of an existing model already in the classroom checkup, where when we go in and first thing that when I'm coaching with a teacher, all of our questions are open-ended questions. We had to go through, we've spent a lot of time writing these interview questions to make sure that it's not yes, no. Do you have students that you have issues with in the classroom?
How do you think we ask that question? It's not that way. How do we ask about students in the classroom?
Right. What are some of the struggles that you have?
Talk about some of the students that you have difficulty with.
Yes.
That's
Right.
exactly what our question is.
And that's-
They don't say the student name, but tell us about some of your most challenging students.
Right. It's not even technically a question, right? It's a statement. So it's just in changing the way that it's said. And so questioning is part of MI, but it's the way that you ask those questions. And like this, how have you handled the problems in the past? Not, do you send kids out of the room? Yes. Okay, great. So, right, it stops the conversation, it stops the progression. Affirmations are really, really important. Affirmations, though, have to be genuine and specific. And, we always talk about, some of our kids that there's always one or two that have stood out for one reason or another in your classroom, right? But if you have to try sometimes really hard to find something positive about that student, and sometimes when I'm working with teachers, I also have to do the same thing. I'm not going to lie. Because I work with the whole array of teachers who do this. Most of the teachers that I'm working with are teaching because they want to make a difference, because they want to be there. I have coached teachers who don't want to be there. And, it's hard sometimes to find affirmations, which is when I usually call on an outsider to say, look, here's what's going on. Help me pull out something genuine about this person. And I can do that. I'm able to find something genuine. But just like kids know when you're faking it, right? Mm-hmm. So do adults, right? They know when you don't care how they're actually doing, right? So you have to be genuine with that. Look, I see how hard you're working. And maybe they're not working as hard as you'd like them to work, but maybe that's hard for them. Or effectively.
I mean,
right.
That's the big one, right? It's like there are a lot of times when we're working and we're working and we're working, and it's just not effective. And as a coach, it feels like, how do I affirm what this person is doing, because everything they're doing is really effective. But they still might be working really hard at something. It just might not be the right thing, right? So, but that's a genuine affirmation.
Sometimes with teachers, you can see their dedication and their perseverance. It comes through. I've worked with teachers who have no classroom management because they're coming in, they're career changers. They've never been through an education course before, but they're there because they want to teach. And with those teachers, you can see it. And affirming that is a step in the right direction. It builds a relationship with that teacher. And that is a strength that they can build on, because if they want to be there, they're more likely to make a change that's going to make a positive impact in their classroom. And then reflective statements. Okay, we've talked a little bit about this, I think, but it's that kind of paraphrasing. So it's restating what someone is saying or pulling out the words that they didn't actually say, but that are implied. Right? So, well, you're having fun in your class, right? They're talking about this activity, they get excited. You're coming to work every day because you want to be here. You want to be here with your students. Okay, and reflecting all of that, and it allows them and gives them almost permission to expand upon that as well. And then a summary is really just I'll actually say to teachers, okay, so let me summarize what I think you just said. I don't want to put words in your mouth. Tell me if I have this right or wrong. And I'll actually say that to them. Like I'm not trying to, again, I'm not trying to trick them. So I'm transparent about what it is that I'm doing. I do it differently at home with my husband. I am trying to trick him sometimes. But with this, I'm not trying to trick my teachers. Okay, I'm not trying to do that. I want to make sure that I truly understand where they're coming from, and they'll correct me. I've been wrong before, because maybe it's the way they said something wasn't how they meant it to sound. And so it gives us some more conversational pieces. So with all of this, you guys have any questions about the ORs?
Are these familiar strategies that you've either been trained on explicitly or you were like, oh, I do this in my real life?
Is there any room or any place for you to acknowledge any body language that you notice that may not be stated?
All the time. And that's, I do that all the time. You seem to be really uncomfortable with this conversation. Can you tell me about that? I mean, because sometimes teachers close up, or you can actually see it on their face.
Or they start to look like they're tearing up, and
I've had people
like,
cry.
This is very emotional for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, it's not a therapy. I'm not giving someone therapy, but sometimes just having that is it's a way for them to kind of get that out of the way, and they're putting their emotions in. I mean, when we teach, we take it personally, I think, because we're there for our personal reason. So it's hard for us to make that separation, but yes, there is definitely time and place for that. Any other questions?
So is MI just staff to staff?
No. So what we didn't really tell you is where MI came from. Did we?
Yeah.
That was a big one. Okay, so MI actually came 1980s.
Yeah, I mean, it came at the beginning of development of it was
back in the 80s. Miller and Rolnick, and it was out of drug therapy, drug rehab. So obviously behavior change needs to happen.
I guess
with
I'm
that,
an
right?
adult to adult, not
No. Well, you can.
There's an emerging interest in using motivational interviewing specifically with adolescents. That's an emerging research field. I know of a group in Florida that's looking at working with motivational interviewing, if you could believe this, with gifted children. So gifted students who are underachieving in their school setting because they have lots of anxiety and they're very just really strung out about everything, and using motivational interviewing to help them. And definitely adolescence has been the closest because it's the closest to adulthood, obviously, from a developmental standpoint. But there is a lot of growing interest around using motivational interviewing, and we have done training around Check and Connect with schools, and we've embedded.
Yeah.
They're basically in the Check and Connect manual. They have this excellent transcript of what a counselor is talking with a student about. And it is MI. They're not calling it that, but it is MI. So when we've trained schools in that manual, we've actually embedded more explicitly around, okay, let's dive into this transcript and look at the different skills this person is using and why is that working and how would we do it differently, and it might not work as well. So, but that's a newer area. It's really been more developed with adults and for people with addiction issues. And so you can imagine, I always say to people, if you might think that whatever you're working with in school is hard to help with behavior change, obviously addiction issues are very challenging to overcome. And so if this can work with that, it can work.
It's being used in the medical field a lot too.
Yeah, it is actually being used in even just brief, I forget what they call it, but there's brief interaction motivational interviewing for physicians as well to help with taking diabetes medicine or whatever health concern.
Yeah. So good question.
But it could also, I heard your question, is it just for one-on-one? And we've talked about using this framework of how to work with teams, how to kind of move
There's
teams
a book on
and
it.
systems change.
There's a book on using MI in groups, actually.
Yeah.
So it can be done that way. But yes, it's the way we use it in our coaching is adult to adult. But certainly there's room for that. We've, like she said, we have coached teachers on how to use this in their sessions with middle school students even. So we're going to try that activity again, now that you've had that really quick.
Now that you're experts.
Yeah, now that you guys are all MI experts, right? We're going to try that activity again. So listener and speaker, you're going to have the same role as you had before. So speaker, you're going to talk about that same change that you were thinking about making, okay? And then listener, you're going to follow these directions. You're not going to try to fix them. You're not going to persuade them. You're not going to offer advice. Okay? You're going to ask them these 3 questions one at a time. Why would you want to make this change? If you did decide to make this change, how might you go about it in order to succeed? And then what are the 3 best reasons for you to do it? You're going to make sure that you listen to all of those answers. Okay, and then you're going to provide them with a short summary, 2 to 3 sentences of what you heard them say. Check in with them, make sure that the summary is correct, that you've heard the right thing, and then ask them, so what do you think you'll do? Okay, we'll leave this up here. It's a little cheat sheet. Okay, does everybody know what they're doing? Okay. Show hands, how many are finished? How many have made it to the end? Okay, a few of you, some of you still kind of maybe haven't quite gotten to the end. How many of you got through the first 3 questions? Okay, so how much time did that take? Anybody know? Less. Not even 5 minutes. Right, I started late over here and we did it in under 3 minutes. So in that situation, some of you, how did that feel? For you who were speaking, how was that different than last time?
It was more reflective.
More
I was
reflective.
having to reflect on myself more.
Oh, okay. You're kind of getting deeper? Getting a little deeper? Okay.
There's also more focus rather than just like, so tell me about what's going on. There's some more focus to the conversation.
I think the first time it was like I'm just giving information, and this one was more back and forth.
So as the listener, the listener, it was a little bit more engaging. Okay. How was it different as a listener?
You had a goal that you were.
How many of you guys came up with a plan this time? Or at least the beginnings of a plan?
Or an identified action that's going to happen.
Right. We didn't have you guys write an entire action plan, right? So that would certainly maybe take a little bit longer, but you might have step 1, right? Figuring out how you're going to do step 1 would be the next step, right? But you've got somewhere to go.
So I think there's a comment back in.
No, I was just going to say, I think it was interesting that we stayed in the same roles. Because I think often with activities like this, you switch roles the next time you do the same activity, and I think that it was really interesting that we stayed in the same roles because we had a little bit, I think initially we were just kind of figuring out, we didn't know what change was going to happen. And so this time we also had a little bit of background, so we were able, I think, to engage better together because we both already knew what we were going to be talking about.
Yeah, and up here, I didn't. In fact, she took on a different role. She became the speaker so that I could listen, and we were still able to get through all of this. And so she has a step, the first step. And I was still able, I think, to build a rapport even in that couple of minutes.
But a few things to note. Whose step was it? Who owned this step?
The speaker.
The speaker. So the listener didn't have this step, and they went in there and they just got the person to come to their step, right? How much of our conversations is there lots of information giving and getting and no steps? How much time do we spend doing that? So this is a focus. So there's this distinction, right? It's very nuanced. I think you actually used the word goal. Like there was a goal, there was a focus. That's true. But it wasn't like the focus is I'm going to get this person to take on this goal. The focus and the goal was I'm going to help this person get to a point of identifying change. And that's really the difference, right? That comes back to this isn't about tricking people into doing what we want them to do. But you can, in fact, get people to want to talk about their change if we have a focus and a way to do it that can facilitate that conversation in a way that it doesn't just become talking.
A question, is brevity a desired outcome for MI? Because I found myself wanting to get to know more about this person before we get to these steps. Even,
right.
Well,
so to put it in context in terms of when I do the coaching, when one of my first steps is we call a teacher interview. And so, nobody's putting on a suit, right? But the whole purpose of that is rapport building. So, but I'm usually given a time constraint based on the planning period the teacher has.
The brevity is not the goal of MI, the brevity is the goal of education. So we try to use MI to achieve brevity because nobody wants to sit there and talk to you for hours on end because nobody has.
No, that's not totally true.
Some of them, and then they get there and they do want to talk to you for hours and then we realize how nice it is to be listened to. Because nobody's listening to us in education, right? How often do people just sit down and talk to you?
Sort of the direction I'm going is that, the trust that's built in the amount of time that we have, I think will have so much more benefit down the road later on for another issue or whatever the case may be, as opposed to being that guy who just came in for a couple minutes and did that and he's gone.
Right. Yeah. So while there are brief interactions, part of my job is relationship building. I have to actually log the amount of time that I spend on relationship building. Believe it or not,
30% of time spent in schools by our coaches is devoted to relationship building.
Yeah, because I have to build that I have to build that trust, which is easier to do in some places than others because of the culture and the climate. So you have to kind of feel that out too. And with some teachers, it's easier than with others. But I used to be kind of an introvert, but this has forced me to be anything but. Because when I go into schools, I have to go meet everyone, and not because I don't want to say I have to. I want to. It makes, first of all, my experience there way better. Much more enjoyable, for sure, right? And it allows me to be approachable so that I can be there in the supportive role that I want to be. I was a classroom teacher, so it's not like I can't empathize with this. I had a lot of the same challenges that some of the teachers that I'm working with have. And I didn't know how to fix them back then. And I can't say that I know how to fix them now, but I can help guide people to find better solutions in their classrooms.
In terms of the time, there's two more things I want to say about brevity. So one thing that I actually did recently, a couple of years ago, I went through a webinar, or I guess I was there live, but it was a webinar as well, with Stephen Rolnick, who's one of the kind of lead authors on this entire technique. And he talks a lot about brevity in terms of what you're saying as the listener. So reflection should be brief and not overcomplicated. And interestingly, I was trained to say things like this. It sounds like you're saying, he's like, get rid of that. Just give the reflection. Say what you hear. So there is an emphasis on brevity in that way. Obviously, when it was developed in addiction counseling, there wasn't like an emphasis on brevity. There was an emphasis on helping people to overcome their addiction. And so with the adaptations in terms of the model we've used for classroom-based coaching in schools is called the Classroom Checkup. There's a book on it. It's excellent. And that is a brief process, but it's because we know that teachers only have so much time. And so the entire process on average in different iterations of the Classroom Checkup that we've done, from interview, collect data, provide constructive feedback, and do some goal setting, is about a 4-hour commitment for teachers face-to-face, because of that maps onto meetings. Meetings tend to be 30 to 45 minutes if our coaches are really able to navigate that. It takes longer sometimes, and sometimes teachers really just want to spend an hour with you in the interview because they really do. They're like, this is great. They don't want to do it initially because they don't think they have the time, and then when they're there, they realize, wow, just sitting down and talking about some of these bigger issues that really have to do with my values around teaching is something that they don't have the luxury to do. But it's not the emphasis to be brief in terms of the whole life of the MI between, say, counselor and client or coach and teacher.
It's more that your responses are brief. Okay. So if you look at your handout that we provided with you guys, there are questions that evoke change talk. And so what we did here is we, at least kind of already talked about some of these, the desire, ability, reasons, needs, concerns, commitment. And so we've given you this cheat sheet here that has some examples of some of these things. So what we were saying over here, it's not a question. Tell me about what you want to be different. Statement, not a question. However, it provides a platform for a conversation, right? And for them answering that. And ability, what makes you think you could do it? There are about 5 or 6 different kind of prompts here for you that could go under each one. And what we're going to give you guys a chance to do now is try to practice this. We know that, again, in 60 minutes, you're not going to be MI experts, but this cheat sheet will kind of help you to guide some of these things. If you look at the back, you have some practice questions that we'll get to in a minute. But the other part that I want to talk about too is these importance and confidence rulers. So when we talk to teachers and when we're coming up, when you get to that point, so what do you do? What do you think you'll do? And then you come up with an actual plan or a goal. Then you end with, why is this important to you and how confident are you? And there's a very purposeful way that you do it. And we have these rulers, these markers. So if your desire is to exercise more, then my question to you might be, so how important would you say it is for you on a scale of 0 to 10? 0 being not important at all and 10 being the most important thing that you do. How important is it for you to exercise regularly? Does anybody want to give me one of their change thing, and I can try this for real. Who had something? What did anybody brave enough to share? What it is that you said?
That was mine.
Okay.
Exercising.
You want to exercise regularly? Was that what you chose? Kind of.
Oh, yes.
Okay. So, for you, on a scale of 0 to 10, how important is it for you to make this change to exercise regularly?
I would say probably 8.
An 8. Fantastic. So tell me, why do you say an 8 instead of like a 6 or 7?
I think because of the amount of time that I've thought about it and procrastinated it.
Okay. Tell me a little more about that.
I know that it would have a lot of benefits for me.
Okay.
So I feel like the benefits are important to achieve.
Okay. Now let me ask you it in this way. Why did you say an 8 instead of a 9 or a 10?
Because I don't want to do it.
What's the difference in those two responses? What is the difference?
Should Sandy be asking the person?
What's the difference between those two responses that she gave me?
Positive and negative.
Positive, negative, right? So I purposely asked her, why are you at an 8 instead of a 6 the first time? Because she's giving me more positive answers. So we want to focus on that. So, or you might say to somebody, so what would it take for you to go from an 8 to a 9? And you're still going to get some more of that positive change talk, positive language. Because obviously that's where you want to focus on, right? We don't want to end with that kind of defeated kind of feeling. And you would do the same thing with confidence. How confident are you in a scale of 0 to 10? Just a minute. In a scale of 0 to 10, how confident?
That I could do it?
That you could do this. You could exercise regularly.
A 10.
A 10! I love that confidence. So why are you so confident?
Because I know I could do it if I just made myself do it.
Fantastic. I'll tell you that we don't normally get a lot of 10s.
We get a lot of 10s for importance sometimes. But
Yes,
not a lot of confidence.
not for right. I mean, that's just the reality. So I think that that's fantastic. And so we've had, you do sometimes have people say, well, I've got like no confidence at all. Someone will say, I don't know, I'm a 3. Fantastic, you could have said 0. Why'd you say 3? There's something there, right? Mm-hmm. Somebody could say 0, that's great. I thought you were going to go off the chart. You got something. You're at least on the positive side, getting there, right? So it's really about trying to really pulling out some of that positive. I don't think I really ever have anybody say there's 0 confidence. Because usually somebody's not going to pick some behavior they want to change if they have absolutely no confidence in themselves, right?
And you
Through
could
the
say
process.
that if they said 0.
Yeah.
Wow, you have 0 confidence, but you're willing to talk about this goal. Tell me what made you want to talk about this goal to begin with.
And you'll probably get some information about how things. You can also say, well, what have you done before that you've been successful at that gives you the confidence that you could do this? You had a question back there.
Well, when I was thinking about it, I was thinking importance versus motivation. So the importance is 10, but motivation is kind of low.
That's why we don't ask the motivation.
Right. So the confidence, and so that difference between that and the confidence verbiage, I think, makes a big difference.
Okay.
So
The idea is that importance underlies motivation, right? So somebody might not be motivated to change, but they know it's important. When you have the importance conversation with them, what does that do? She just said it. If I had asked her what is your motivation to exercise?
To be more healthy.
No, I mean like 0 to 10. How motivated are you to go out and start exercising?
Like not, yeah.
There you go, right? So we are eliminating, right? She says the whole reason that she is not doing it is because she's not motivated to actually do the work, right? We all know that. That's the ambivalence piece that MI tells us. Everybody's ambivalent to change. We all want to be somewhere else, and we don't want to do the steps then. But when we get them thinking about all the reasons it's so important to them and what the outcomes of that are going to be, and then we have the confidence conversation, which head on, you often get, it's very important. Teachers are amazing people. They want to help solve the problems of the world, right? So they'll be like, it is so important for me to engage with students. And then you say, how confident are you? Only a 4 or a 6. And that's a great time to say, okay, what are some of the barriers for you? What is making you feel like you're not confident to do this? And then you talk about the barriers and you problem solve around them. And so, it's very deliberate that there's no question, how motivated are you to do this?
Have you seen in your work
the transference to the teacher and the student, because this is such a replication of what goes on with kids. They want to get good grades, they know they should get good grades, but they're not motivated to. Why are they, and ask those questions.
Well, kind of what Elise had said before, when we coached some of the schools around Check and Connect, that is part of our training that we embedded within that, is helping those student mentors then be able to work with their students around using MI language and actually picking out some of that MI language. Have I seen teachers do that? A little bit. It kind of depends on, you don't suddenly become able to do MI because you've been through the experience of MI.
But then they see the connection. They say, well, that sounds like one of my students. I know he wants to get grades, but he's just not motivated.
Sometimes, yeah, but remember, we're focusing more on the teacher changing their behavior. And so
they're not always making that connection that you've helped kind of motivate that change.
Yeah, right. So it depends on where they are in that process. When you have teachers who have more of a counseling background, or that more natural ability in that sense, then yes, they're going to make that connection much easier and much quicker. Not every teacher would make a good counselor, right? Doesn't mean they're a bad teacher.
We're on time. So why don't we do this, and we'll see where we're at about the rest of the slides. You want to do the rest of the slides, and then
it's time.
Is it time now?
Yeah, according to that. So what we were going to have you do, let's in the 2 minutes that we have, what we were going to have you guys do is really practice some of these. So we are providing you with this handout to take with you, but these are 13 different statements that might relate to your role. You've probably heard some of these things before. Teachers come to you and talk to you about this. You might have said these things before, right? So a teacher might say, I don't think my class is out of control. But have you been in a classroom that is out of control? And maybe they're not seeing it. And so think about how you could actually use some of these statements here to address that with a teacher. Or I might be able to do a better job of setting expectations. Okay, so there's a need there, right? So you might go under the needs for disadvantage or
a weak commitment, a less strong commitment.
Right, less strong commitment. And these are different cheat sheet kinds of questions that we've actually had, as some of our coaches have started with coaching, they've taken this kind of with them as like a cheat sheet. Okay, well, hold on, let me, you might not do that. But start thinking about how some of these questions could play in, because these are not, they're probing, right? It's getting a little bit deeper. It's not this yes, no kind of questions. So we're going to have you kind of do that and talk about some of the real brief responses to avoid. Really, you're not supposed to be telling people what to do. When we coach teachers, we say, do you mind if I give you some advice? I've never had anybody say, no, I don't want your advice, or I don't want your opinion, because they're with me because they want some kind of behavior change, but I don't provide them with the advice without asking for their permission to do so. Right, so in MI, you only give advice with permission. Because I'm not there, again, to fix the problem. But sometimes I have resources that the teachers don't have. I have evidence-based research and I have evidence-based practices kind of in my toolbox that I can bring to them that they haven't seen before. And so I can provide all of that. Elicit is another technique.
It's the rule.
Yeah.
If you're going to give advice, you elicit what they already know, you provide the information they're requesting, and then you elicit more information. So it's all about balance. About how much you're giving versus how much you're facilitating. And so if you do too much giving, you're over facilitating, you're being too expert. Same is true for using too many open-ended questions. It takes the balance out.
Yeah. So we were going to have you practice some of these, building in some of these ORS techniques as well, and really focusing on maybe some of the concerns that you hear as a PBIS lead or PBIS coach or just a member in your school or administrator or whatever, and practice using some of those ORs. Of course, we just don't have the time. MI is we didn't even touch everything about MI.
I want to leave you with these last two quotes. I think that the first one really captures